Ladies and gentlemen, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where in the world you are joining us from today. On behalf of the Foundation for IT Sustainability, we would like to welcome you to International Green IT Awareness Week for 2012. Thank you for joining us for this very special live presentation. We're glad you could join us today. My name is Tim Martin. I'm a project manager with the Foundation for IT Sustainability, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of today's session and also walk through some housekeeping items. Then I'll turn it over to our featured presenter, Tim Cotter of Awake, who will introduce himself and his topic and start the presentation for today. As you may know, International Green IT Awareness Week was founded and is sponsored by the Foundation for IT Sustainability, a global non-profit organisation. Our mission is to reduce the negative impacts of technology on the environment, as well as promote the sustainable use of technology to help solve environmental problems. And we do this via a number of ways, including educating individuals, corporations and government, promoting the implementation of green IT best practices, and encouraging the development of more sustainable technology alternatives. If you haven't heard of us before, please do visit us on the web at www.fits.org. As I mentioned, today we have our very special guest, Tim Cotter of Awake, joining us to present his topic entitled Building a Culture of Sustainability in Your Organisation. Tim will present his material, a copy of which is available right now in PDF format on this session's registration page. From there, we'll also take questions. We'd ask that if you do have any questions throughout the session, please submit them in the question box on the GoToWebinar control panel, and we shall answer each of those questions at the end of the session. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Tim to introduce himself and his presentation.
Okay, thanks Tim, and welcome to this webinar on building a culture of sustainability in your organisation. My name's Tim Cotter. I have a business called Awake. I specialise in supporting organisations and communities to develop a culture of sustainability. We'll talk more about that later on. There's lots of things we want to get through in this session. I've got an action-packed hour for you. First, we're going to talk a little bit about what is a culture of sustainability. We won't labour that point too much because it can get a bit boring now talking about definitions of sustainability, etc. So we'll have a brief overview of what's a culture of sustainability and also what needs to be present in order for a culture of sustainability to develop. Then we're going to look at the individual and organisational enablers of sustainability in an organisation. There's 13 of those that we're going to take you through in some detail and also talk about what they are, why they are important, and what are some things you can do to try and bring in or enhance those enablers of sustainability. And lastly, we're going to take you through some steps to building a culture of sustainability. So if you're embarking on a path to build a culture of sustainability in your organisation, or if you're already partway down that path that needs some help in increasing the degree to which sustainability is embedded in your culture, then there'll be some tips and guidelines for you there. So as I said, first we're going to talk a little bit about what is a culture of sustainability. There's no one definition, but culture of sustainability is one where sustainability is really part of all business decisions. So it might not necessarily dominate in all those decisions. It might not always get the thumbs up, but it gets a seat at the table when decisions are made in the business. An example is I work with organisations that say, well, we considered using recycled concrete for something that we were constructing, or using recycled water for an industrial process. And in the end, it didn't get across the line. That's due to expense or some sort of logistical considerations. So it doesn't always win. Sustainability is always the number one priority in the organisation, in a culture of sustainability, but it's considered, and someone always mentions it around the boardroom table, or it's more importantly, it's in the decision-making processes or purchasing processes, for instance. In an organisation with a strong culture of sustainability, it's often part of the core values of the organisation, whether that's stated as a core value or whether it's implied in the values of the organisation. But it's something that is closely intertwined with how the organisation goes about its business. And really, culture in itself is often defined as the way we do things around here. So sustainability is just part of what we do. And lastly, that point there about commitment versus compliance is pretty important. So when you're trying to get people to undertake sustainable behaviours or make sustainable decisions, they can either do so because of some reason to do with compliance, so to keep you happy, or to do it for the money, or to avoid punishment, or they can do it because they think it's a good idea. In which case you talk about that being a commitment rather than just compliance. In a culture of sustainability, people do sustainability things because they're committed to it, because they think it's a good idea, not for those other reasons. And so there's strong evidence that suggests that when people do something because they think it's a good idea, they're a lot more effective at it. There's a brief quotation at the bottom of the page there about a piece of research which was done, which looked at people's environmental performance or some environmental goals and tasks they were set, and then they checked in with them later on and said, why did you do it? And the people who felt like they did it out of a sense of compliance, as I said before, to keep other people happy, or out of bribery or guilt or whatever, then they were less likely to do a good job of it. So their actual performance on those tasks were less effective. They didn't enjoy it as much. They were less likely to follow through on it later on. The efforts were less sustained. And so in a culture of sustainability, we're more likely to see commitment rather than compliance. So you can imagine if you're asking people to turn off their computers before they go home at night, the people who do it because they think it's a good idea, because they're bought into it, they're more likely to do it regularly and sustain the effort. People who do it to avoid the green representative or the sustainability officer or whatever in the organisation hassling them are less likely to do a good job. And that really is the underpinning element of a culture of sustainability. Now, the sort of things we see and hear around an organisation with the culture of sustainability, there's lots of different types of things. It's always good just to sort of listen and see what people are doing as part of a assessment of how the organisation is going with sustainability. Obviously, you'll see people doing things like recycling, or putting their organic waste in organic waste bin, turning off their computers at night, biking to work, all those sort of things. We also see, as I said before, sustainability being considered in decision making. You see measures of sustainability being undertaken, all those sort of things, and there's a list of them there. But in essence, you can tell when sustainability is a strong part of the culture rather than just something that people feel like they have to do. And importantly, you'll also see people challenging unsustainable behaviours. So you'll see people asking the question on people when they're doing the wrong thing. So that's a brief overview of what is a culture of sustainability and what do we see and hear in it. Now, in terms of what needs to be present in creating a culture of sustainability, there's no one body of research which says these are all the things that need to be present, but there's a lot of research into the drivers or enablers of sustainable behaviour in organisations, and in fact outside of organisations as well. And so what I presented here is a model which divides the enablers into two sets. The one on the top left there, organisational enablers. So these are the things that the organisation brings to the table. So those are the things the organisation provides which support sustainable behaviour. I'm going to talk about those things in detail, but there are things like sustainability leadership and processes and facilities which support sustainability. The bottom right there are individual enablers. So these are the things that the individuals within the organisation have basically inside of them. So they're the individual commitments and things like beliefs about sustainability and responsibility for sustainability and knowledge, etc. So if you combine those sort of two things, then you start to get a culture of sustainability. Now, to show how those two things interact, those two sets of enablers interact, in this simple model here, we're looking at what happens when one or either of those things is present or absent. So when you have a high level of individual enablers and organisational enablers, etc. So on the bottom left, for a start, when those two things are low, when individual enablers are low and organisational enablers are low. Basically, there's not a lot of attention on sustainability, so the people in the organisation aren't really interested in it, and there's no real organisational support for sustainability either. So it's just not really on the radar for that organisation. It's not really going to happen. Now, individual enablers are strong, but organisational enablers are not. That's where you get a lot of individuals in the organisation committed to sustainability, but the organisation is not really supporting it. So I'm sure some of you listening would have been in those sort of organisations, those sort of situations in an organisation where maybe you're one of those people who are committed to sustainability, or there's people in the organisation who are committed, but the organisation doesn't provide any real leadership, doesn't provide any support for it. And so a lot of those people get fairly frustrated and demotivated, particularly if a large percentage of people in the organisation are keen on sustainability. The next group there is where organisational enablers are strong, but individual enablers are weak. So that's where the organisation's put a fair bit of effort into it. They've really pushed for sustainability. Might be some strong processes in place. But there's a fair bit of frustration around because people aren't taking up those behaviours. So maybe they fail to engage the people in sustainability. And so the champions, the management who have supported sustainability in the organisation, or the sustainability, maybe a green team, sustainability champs, they sort of get a bit confused. They feel like it's going to be a waste of effort and resources. And so you have a bit of a dead end or a bit of a roadblock when the people aren't engaged in sustainability. And so, I've just recently spoken to a woman in a workshop that I ran on sustainable behaviours, and she said she'd just spent a whole lot of time compiling a really comprehensive green purchasing guide in the organisation, and she put a lot of effort into it and found that people weren't really using it. She was quite sort of confused and frustrated because she put all this effort in, but people weren't using it. And as we talked about further, it really became apparent that part of the reason was because those individual enablers weren't in place. So people weren't really engaged in the idea of sustainability in the organisation. And so she basically provided an organisational enabler in terms of a resource for people to make sustainable purchasing decisions, but it wasn't being used because people weren't really bought into the idea of it. And it may have been a lack of knowledge as well, as we'll see. It's one of the individual enablers is sustainability knowledge. Finally, when you get those things right, then you're more likely to get a culture of sustainability. So when all the individual enablers are in place and the organisational enablers have been provided by the organisation, then you're more likely to get what we call a culture of sustainability. So what we're going to do next is have a closer look at each of those enablers, starting with the individual enablers. Now don't rush to write this down because we'll be going through them all individually in a second, but those are the 5 individual enablers identified in this model at least that need to exist for a culture of sustainability. Now, one of the things about the individual enablers is that they're not necessarily specific to an organisation. So these are the sort of things that you might have even if you changed organisations, or even the things that you have when you're at home. So they're not organisationally specific. You might have strong beliefs about sustainability and strong responsibility, etc., strong knowledge control, etc. So these are really standalone things that the individuals in the organisation basically hold internally. So the first of these enablers is beliefs about sustainability. Now notice also in the green box there we're going to provide a few tips for how these enablers might be enhanced within your organisation. So the first one is beliefs about sustainability. So it's basically the fact that if you have a strong belief that sustainability is important, that your organisation should have a role in sustainability, then you're more likely to obviously engage in sustainable behaviours yourself. Now, if your people don't share those beliefs, that's quite a toughie. I mean, influencing people's beliefs is, as we find at an organisational level, but even at a national level, trying to change people's beliefs around sustainability and climate change and that sort of thing is proving to be quite a challenge. And the way to do that is obviously through educating and providing evidence and demonstrating the benefits as well, particularly in an organisational context. And if you can demonstrate to people the business case for sustainability, for instance, you stand a much better chance of their buy-in. Now, the second one there is responsibility, sustainability, and it's slightly different from as your job, so you take ownership for it. So you could, for instance, you have beliefs that it's important. So in the previous slide, we talked about beliefs. You can believe that sustainability is important, but not necessarily think it's your job, or you might think it's everyone else's job or the organisation's job. So this one is about saying, I have responsibility for it, I'm willing to do something about it, I'm willing to prioritise it in my decisions. And this is one in particular that applies inside and outside of organisations. There's a lot of research that shows that that's a real precursor to sustainable decisions. People don't feel like sustainability is important, they're not going to recycle at home either, or they're not going to bike to work, etc. Well, not for sustainability reasons. So again, the way to influence those sort of things is through education, but also through personal reflection. A lot of this is to do with getting people to engage with their heart rather than just their heads, rather than just convincing them with a lot of facts and figures. It's get people to recognise how sustainability relates to their values, and we find that has pretty good results in organisations. Just doing some sort of exercises around what does this mean to me as a person rather than just me as a worker. The next enabler there is around perceived mandate and support. So people feel like, this is part of our culture, this is what we do, we've got support from leadership and from the organisation as a whole, then they're more likely to engage in it. It's often a barrier to people engaging in sustainable behaviour when they feel like they haven't necessarily got the support to do it. It's especially important in decision making when people say, well, we would go with the recycled option, but it costs 10% more, for instance, and we're not really sure if we've got the mandate to do that. And so if people feel like they haven't got a lot of support to undertake sustainable behaviours, then you need to really demonstrate it through the actions as an organisation, through creating a clear commitment to sustainability, really telling people clearly what they can and cannot do really helps. So people feel like they're on solid ground if they do, innovate or try a sustainable behaviour. And also any sort of signals that can be sent to people that this is part of what we do through creating opportunities for teams, making it part of team processes, etc. Really gives people that sense that, this is what we do. One of the big drivers in behaviour change for sustainability is around social norms. If people feel like it's the way in which we do things around here, both as a society but also within an organisation, then that's a really strong driver or motivator for people to act. They feel like other people are doing it too. Another really important enabler is sustainability knowledge. So probably the single biggest barrier when the organisations that I've worked with, and we ask them, what's stopping you, or what would help you operate more sustainably, it's knowledge, because people are being asked to undertake sustainable behaviours. They don't always know what those are and how to do them. So they might say, well, we've been asked to consider life cycle analysis, for instance, in our decisions, but we don't actually know how to do a life cycle analysis for these products or these services. So educating staff is really important there, and really providing opportunities for people to get what they need so that they no longer left in the dark. You can have some people that are quite committed to sustainability but don't really know what to do. And finally, individual enabler that I want to discuss is perceived control. Another one that doesn't necessarily operate just within an organisation, but also outside of the organisation as well. If people feel like they have a strong sense of control over their actions, and that those actions will make a difference, and they're more likely to operate in a more sustainable way. And so this operates on two levels. One is around, do I feel like I have much control over my actions, or am I just a cog in a wheel and I don't really have any say over whether my actions are sustainable or not? And so those things actually, as a personality trait, people vary in terms of their sense of control. In psychology terms, it's referred to as locus of control. So people who have a strong internal locus of control are people that feel that they have a lot of control over their outcomes in life. whereas those who have an external locus of control are less likely to feel like they have much control over their destiny, and they're not very sort of self-determined. We call that an external locus of control. So those with an internal locus of control, it's been demonstrated many a time, that are more likely to undertake sustainable behaviours as a personality trait. And so that's quite hard to influence. If your job is to try and engage people in sustainability, it's quite difficult to transform their personality. So those are quite solid personality traits. However, the other way that operates is where people's attitudes towards specific behaviours. So does turning off my computer at night make a hell of a lot of difference to global warming? Or does turning off my lights when I leave the office, or saving a bit of water, saving a bit of energy, a bit of paper, does that really make any difference? Basically, if people think it does, then they're more likely to engage in those behaviours. And so your job in trying to promote sustainable behaviours is to demonstrate to people that sort of stuff does make a difference. And that's why you see communications around, if everybody turned off their computer at night, it would take 20,000, it would be the equivalent of taking 20,000 cars off the road, or we could shut down a whole coal-fired power station if everybody turned off their lights or turned off their TV at the wall. All those sort of things are designed to try and enhance people's sense of perceived control and influence. And so those are things you can change as a promoter of sustainability. And so demonstrating those things, getting people to plan actions, goal setting, etc. So working with people so that they can see what differences they can make and commit to them is a way of enhancing control. And also just giving people control actually helps. So rather than just getting people to perceive that they have control, giving them more control in reality. So giving them the option of turning up and turning down their heating in their office, or their ability to put their computer into hibernation mode, that sort of thing makes a difference. So that's the individual enablers. So what we're going to go through now are the organisational enablers. Remember, these are the things that the organisation provides in terms of promoting sustainability or supporting a culture of sustainability. The first of those is commitment to sustainability. First to do with the organisation's, the clarity with which the organisation has communicated its commitment. So whether it's set sustainability goals, set a sustainability vision, strategies, etc. A piece of research which is mentioned down the bottom left there was an analysis of what are the really important things which influence the culture of sustainability, and they found that a well-communicated written environmental policy was the single most important policy driver. So that was a pretty important finding. So it basically said, one place to start, and we'll be discussing that later in terms of the steps of the culture of sustainability. A really important place to start is at the top. What are our overall commitments to sustainability? So that supports a lot of the drivers and enablers of sustainability, like that support we talked about earlier and the mandate. So the organisation needs to really be clear on clarifying and communicating their vision and their strategies around sustainability, and taking lots of opportunities to emphasise that, engage with people in it, and remind people all the time that it's part of what we do. Another really important driver or enabler of sustainable behaviour is the leadership. People feel like the leadership's on board and that they're supported, and that the leaders are walking the talk in terms of sustainability, then that has a big correlation with the behaviours of the individuals in the organisation. Again, a study by Ramis and Steger down the bottom left of the screen there found that one of the biggest drivers, alongside the commitment to sustainability from the previous slide, the next biggest influence on sustainable behaviours were supervisors and management supporting sustainability. So it's really important to make sustainability leadership part of your management development, making leaders accountable for it through things like linking it to their bonuses and reward systems, and training them about what does it mean to be a sustainability leader, because it's an easy thing to bandy about, saying you need to be a leader in sustainability. What does it actually mean? What sort of skills are required that are different? And there are a lot of interesting pieces of research around what do sustainability leaders do differently than non-sustainability leaders. And they're often around creating a culture of innovation, supporting people to try new things, and also being clearly visionary leaders, having a high level of emotional intelligence, those sort of things. It's really important to make sure that people are one step ahead of the employees in the organisation as well. It often helps so that they know how to support sustainability as people start to grow more aware of it. Okay, the next enabler there is around the effectiveness of your activities to embed sustainability. Lots of organisations put signs up saying please turn off the lights on the way out, etc. And they also run sustainability workshops and make efforts to try and engage and educate people about sustainability. So the effectiveness of those is really important as a driver for creating a culture of sustainability. And that starts with researching what people need and finding out what's going to be relevant for people, because often these things are just thrown in fairly haphazardly. And at times of some of you would have heard of the term green fatigue, which refers to people feeling a bit sort of jaded by the efforts to promote sustainability. So you need to make sure that these efforts that you make are relevant and targeted and interesting to people. Otherwise, they'll switch off. The next enabler is around job responsibilities. You often hear it said that for sustainability to really be embedded in an organisation, it needs to be part of everyone's job, not just the sustainability manager or the green team. So an organisation that's got a strong culture of sustainability has made sustainability part of everyone's job. So everyone has some responsibilities around sustainability. Maybe they've been incentivised in some way in their rewards and recognition program to include sustainable behaviours. And so if you can put that in people's job descriptions, it's a particularly good idea. But also getting people to be engaged in how that might work as well. So rather than just telling people what to do, that's a common theme right throughout the enablers anyway. Engaging people is really important rather than just telling them what to do. So in a way you can get people to contribute to how they're going to include sustainability, how they're going to contribute to the organisation's sustainability goals is important. Now, I touched a couple of times on the importance of rewards and recognition, because it's a basic fact that if you want people to do something, then it's useful to provide incentive for them to do it. Not as the only way of engaging them, but it's if you've got people incentivised and rewarded for undertaking unsustainable behaviours, then it's a lot more difficult to try and get them on board. So looking at what's supporting people and what's standing in the way of people engaging in sustainability is really important. Good organisations, the most advanced organisations in terms of creating a culture of sustainability, do have that in place. They link sustainability to rewards and recognition. Melbourne Water is one. They're strong on that sort of thing. As part of people's remuneration package, they get cars, or some of the people get cars, but they've incentivised people to promote the uptake of cars which are high on fuel efficiency. Intel is another organisation that's come out in recent months saying that their top executives now have sustainability outcomes linked to their bonus and incentive packages. So that's the remuneration process, but also your rewards and recognition processes outside of that. So things like awards and recognising people who make a good effort around sustainability is really important. And ensuring that those people are celebrated as the top salespeople and that sort of thing. That sustainability is one of those criteria for success. Now, it's becoming increasingly apparent that innovation is really strongly linked to sustainability. You'll see a lot of people whose job is like the sustainability manager, for instance, now having innovation being closely wrapped up in what they do and often put into their job title. So it's really clear that the old way of business doesn't it isn't going to work in the future. And so sustainability is really part of innovation. We need to do new stuff in order to create a more sustainable organisation. So you really can't have sustainability without some sort of innovation. And so creating an innovative organisation is one of the precursors to creating a sustainable organisation. So having innovation as an organisational value in itself is a really important supporter of sustainability. And providing opportunities and incentives for people to try new things is part of creating a sustainable organisation as well. Often people say that, yeah, we want to engage in sustainability, but we're not really given the time or the support to do it. So we're told that if we try something new around sustainability, that it's kind of at our own risk and we have to do it in our own time, or we don't have any budget to do it. That's really a behaviour which undermines creating a culture of sustainability. So promoting innovations is a really important supporter of creating a sustainable organisation. And so you need to train your managers to support innovation as well. That's a management skill, being supportive of people who try new things and not punishing them when they go wrong, making mistakes allowable as long as people learn from them. Next organisational enabler is important is around processes, which is a really big field. This is one of the larger, more all-encompassing parts of creating a sustainable organisation. So basically about reviewing all the processes in your organisation, saying what supports sustainability and what doesn't. An example would be an organisation I worked with recently, and people talk about their challenges in reducing their paper use because contractually they were required to print everything out 3 times and put it in a file. So all their contracts had to be produced in triplicate on paper. And so one of their challenges or one of their actions to create a more sustainable organisation was to review that policy and to try and use more soft copies rather than printing out paper. And lots of organisations, most organisations have hundreds of those sort of processes which get in the way of sustainability. Some of you would have heard of Ray Anderson, the late leader of Interface Carpets, who's a true pioneer and leader in sustainability. And he was a big advocate of sustainability, not just necessarily being around materials and environment, but also around all forms of waste. And by waste, he meant not just their offcuts of their carpet and those sort of things, but waste being including things like duplication, mixing up deliveries, any sort of thing which got in the way of the organisation's efficiency. He considered waste and something that needed to be eliminated in the name of sustainability. So if we send out an invoice to the wrong people, he said, that's waste, that undermines sustainability. So any sort of process barriers and duplication that you can remove helps your cause in terms of building a culture of sustainability. And lastly, in terms of organisational enablers, facilities, having facilities which support people to operate sustainably is a biggie. So you'll hear a lot of people say, well, I'd love to bike to work, but there's no showers here. Or what do we do with this organic waste because we've only got a landfill bin and a recycling bin. So any sort of facilities, and in the IT area, for instance, providing a computer system which supports people to turn off their computer easily at night, or simple things like having lights which automatically turn off, etc. Those sort of things all support sustainable behaviours and creating a culture of sustainability. It's not just providing those things, it's also training people how to use them. There's a whole art and science around how to word signage, where to place signage, how to design waste paper bins, for instance, so that people are more encouraged to do the sustainable behaviours and less likely to do the unsustainable behaviours. So training, providing facilities, training people, and also providing processes which support the adoption of sustainable facilities. It says there, including sustainability criteria and the purchase of plant and equipment and that sort of thing is really important. So those are the individual and organisational enablers of sustainability we want to discuss today. And So they basically operate as a checklist. So if you can provide all those organisational and individual enablers, then you're much more likely to develop a culture of sustainability. So the next step we're going to look at is, or the next section is how do you get started on this stuff? What are the steps to creating a culture of sustainability? And there's no all-encompassing set of steps that you need to take. But here are 4 steps which I believe are effective ways of creating a culture of sustainability. The first step is around where are we at now, and I advocate this for any sort of behaviour change approach, is finding out where you're at now, because that helps you to set a baseline from where you're starting at so you can measure your progress, but also tells you what you need to do. So it's really the diagnostic part. Which of the enablers are we strong on, and which of the enablers are we not so strong on? There's a number of ways of doing that. You can conduct a survey, and I'll talk about one that I've developed shortly, but also reviewing your processes, etc., to sort of find out where are we at the moment, and identifying the gaps. So where do we want to be in terms of sustainability, and where are we now? Now, one useful tool is a short plug for a tool I've developed in terms of measuring the enablers of sustainability within your culture. It's a sustainability culture indicator. So as I said before, it sets a baseline for future evaluations. You can measure your progress. You can really target your efforts to which are the ones that we're weak on. And you can also go back in a year's time and measure, or 6 months or a year's time and measure how we're going. What impact have we made in terms of these activities that we've been doing to promote sustainability? So it measures the 13 enablers of sustainability. It's customizable, so it's a set of 50 items, but most organisations I've used with change a few of the items to make it more specific to their organisation or their area of sustainability interest. And it's a really useful tool it's specifically designed around the model of enablers so that you can measure which ones we're strong on, which ones we're not. So I advocate using that. So once you've worked out where you're at, next step is to develop a sustainability framework. Now, a sustainability framework is really a way for an organisation to make a clear statement about where do we stand with sustainability, where do we want to go with it, how are we going to get there, what are the actions that we need to undertake in order to be a more sustainable organisation. As I mentioned before, it's one of the biggest drivers of a culture of sustainability is the existence of a really clear commitment to sustainability. And the sustainability framework is one vehicle for doing that. But it also helps you pull together a lot of the different things you're doing around sustainability. It's pretty common in organisations to have lots of activities that we're doing around sustainability. So there'll be lots of projects. There might be a climate change strategy. There might be a green team. There might be an energy efficiency push somewhere in the organisation. So there might be lots of different projects, and often those things are not particularly strongly linked. The sustainability framework pulls those things together in terms of a strong, unified approach. Now, you can go to 10 different organisations and find 10 different types of sustainability framework. There's no one way of doing it. And so there are 2, I guess, general ways of approaching it. One is to use some of the popular sort of framework methodologies, and most of you would have heard of things like the Natural Step Framework or the Global Reporting Initiative, which are models which support sustainability frameworks. More often than not, though, I find that people customise or create their own sustainability framework, often guided by things like the Natural Step Principles or the Global Reporting Initiative as a driver of the framework. Now, again, there's no one way of developing a customised sustainability framework, but you usually find that they'll involve 3 things, at least 3 things. One is a sustainability vision. So at some point the organisation will make a clear statement about where do we want to go with sustainability, why are we in it, what do we want to achieve. So the sustainability vision is a common element within a sustainability framework. Usually beneath that are a bunch of strategies. So these are the things these are the high-level things that we need to do in order to reach our sustainability vision. And then under that, there's a whole lot of actions or projects which need to be executed in order to reach each of those strategies. So just to clarify the the distinction between strategies and actions. So a strategy might be something like to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So that might be a strategy. The actions underneath it are the things we need to do to get there. So the actions might be replace all our existing lights with LED lights, or consolidate our data centers, that sort of thing. So those are the individual efforts which need to be made under the larger strategies. So as I said, there's no one way of approaching sustainability frameworks, but those three elements tend to be the most common that we see, and as I said, often guided by those larger principles like the natural set principle, etc. Just provide a couple of examples here of sustainability frameworks. Simple examples of sustainability frameworks that have been developed by organisations around the place. This is a Gull sustainability framework. You can see there that it's divided into 4 areas: planet, people, processes, and products. So rather than the individual strategies, they've decided to divide it into 4 different areas. And beneath each of those, there's activities that they're going to be looking into. Another good example of a sustainability framework was when I had the good fortune to see a presentation by somebody from the Cairns Regional Council in Queensland, and they've done a really good effort on creating a sustainability framework, and they've created high-level strategies, but as it says there, each thing's broken down to a number of sub-themes. So you can see that they've got a number of strategies around improving resource efficiency, conserving biodiversity, etc. And under each of those, there's a number of focus areas. So there's a website down the bottom where you can go and download that presentation. There's some interesting observations there, and they've done a great job of engaging their people in that process as well. So once you've worked out where you're at and created a sustainability framework, then it's time to start educating and engaging your people. Now, there's a strong distinction between those things. So it's not just about telling people what to do, but it's also about involving them and engaging them. Often sustainability is something, as I said before, it's about sort of creating commitment and people's ownership of it rather than just a bunch of instructions and processes. And if people can sort of feel it and engage with their heart rather than just their head, they're more likely to make sustainable decisions. And it also eliminates that need for a lot of controls and compliance and rules around sustainability. Those things are still important, but it just means that people will think sustainability by themselves rather than needing to be reminded all the time. So engaging is really important, not just educating and telling. And again, it's part of behaviour change. There's a whole sort of field and workshop around behaviour change, things like habit change, creating social norms, all those sort of things are really important in behaviour change and engaging people in sustainability. And that has to also include external stakeholders as well, because they're often part of the group that you need to buy in to your sustainability initiatives. Ray Anderson from Interface, who I mentioned earlier, again, a real champion of sustainability. One of the reasons the Interface story was so compelling was because this is an organisation that you wouldn't usually associate, or industry you wouldn't usually associate with sustainability necessarily. They were a high-polluting, high-resource use organisation, and this guy, Ray Anderson, really transformed that organisation and became a pioneer of sustainability in industrial organisations. And so that really raised eyebrows. It woke people up so you could see that it wasn't just NGOs and naturally green organisations that could have big wins around sustainability. So I fully recommend reading some of Ray Anderson's material. Confessions of a Radical Industrialist is one of them. So he was a big fan of engaging all the stakeholders, and if you read anything around Interface Floor, the carpet organisation now, you can really see that people are engaged and it's not just lip service. An example of organisations that do a lot around educating and engaging people. This is the Walmart approach. So they asked people to complete my sustainability plan. So each person made a sustainability commitment, which was part of making it real for everybody and each individual taking personal responsibility for sustainability. And we talked about before, that's one of the drivers of sustainability is responsibility, everyone feeling like it's part of their job. And so they had a clear process. Obviously, they're a well-resourced organisation and they had a lot of tools and resources online to be able to do that sort of thing. But anything you can do to get people to reflect on what does it mean to my job and what are my commitments makes a big difference. And lastly, reviewing and aligning your processes, as we talked about before. Processes are a big driver of sustainability, a big enabler of sustainable behaviours. And so this is a really big job in the path towards creating a culture of sustainability. It's looking at the sustainability framework that we've created and saying what are all these actions and projects that we've committed to, sort of short-term, medium and long-term, and ensuring that they're enhancing the enablers of sustainability. Now this isn't done overnight. There's often organisations when they go through and the process of creating a sustainability framework is a really good discipline for finding out what are all those processes and actions and prioritising them. But they also require a lot of people across the organisation to be involved. So as I said before, rewards and recognition, for instance, that isn't something that sustainability manager usually has responsibility for. It's the HR team. So the HR team needs to be involved in that one. There might be industrial processes that need the input of the engineers or the industrial people. So it needs to be everyone across the organisation involved in taking ownership for each of those processes and actions, which is why creating the engagement and the culture is really important. If it's just left to the sustainability manager to run around the organisation trying to get these actions done, it's really not going to work. It needs to be a team effort. So that's really the steps to creating a culture of sustainability. And here's pretty much what I do is workshops around behaviour change for sustainability and also building a culture of sustainability. Do a number of assessment tools. I've talked about sustainability culture indicator and there's other tools which I deliver around assessments of sustainability attitudes and behaviours. A number of consulting projects, talks, mini workshops, these sort of things. And also I deliver a wake-up call e-zine, which is around 1,300 subscribers. It's been out about 50 times. So it's a pretty good resource for behaviour change and the psychology of sustainability, which you're welcome to subscribe to on the website. Okay, so that's pretty much the end of the presentation. So I now welcome questions.
Great, thanks.
And back to Tim Martin to facilitate that.
Yeah, look, thank you very much for that, Tim. It was a fantastic presentation. I'm sure people got a lot out of that, a lot of information there, very insightful. As Tim said, we certainly will now commence with the Q&A portion of our live speaker session. So if you do have any questions that you would like to ask Tim about his presentation, his work with Awake, or his experiences in sustainability or green IT, then please submit your questions now in the questions chat panel in the web and our control box. Tim will address each question in turn, and please remember, if you would like to speak with Tim or a representative of the Foundation for IT Sustainability, please feel free to email info@fits.org at any time following this session, and we'll be more than happy to assist your query following the conclusion of today's session. So now for the user-submitted questions. The first question we have for you, Tim, is what are some behaviour change tools and techniques that you can recommend in order to get people to engage in sustainable behaviours?
That's a good question. There's a number of approaches that we take to engaging people in sustainability. One is around values. So if you can get people to recognise how sustainability is related to values beyond just environment, it's really important, because as much as people value the environment, it's not necessarily one of their priority values. When we measure the values of society, for instance, we find that environments, when we get people to rank their values, environment might come about 15th out of 20 values. Things like family are really important. Things like family and integrity and insight and achievement are actually more important to people. So in order to engage people in sustainability, we need to demonstrate to people how sustainability is related to those values, not just about saving the environment or saving polar bears, but what's in it for them. And so one of the things we do to engage people in sustainability is get them to reflect on what are my values and how does sustainability relate to those. Habit change is a big part of behaviour change because habitual behaviours are things that we do fairly unconsciously and repetitively. And one of the approaches to behaviour change is to intervene in those habits, to recognise what things hold in place habits and how can we change the conditions which support the habit, and try to change habits to more sustainable ones, because often people just do unsustainable behaviours habitually and don't really think about it. They don't plan to operate unsustainably, they just do what they've always done. So it's a matter of intervening in those. Social norms are another driver of sustainable behaviour, so often all behaviour, the driver of a lot of our behaviour is just our sense of what everyone else does, what's normal. And so if we can communicate to people that sustainability is normal and lots of people are doing it, and demonstrate that people just like us are doing it and reaping the benefits of it, then that often influences behaviour as well. So those are just some of the ways in which behaviour change practitioners go about their work.
Great, thanks, Tim. We have another user-submitted question now, which is, Tim, I understand Walmart have opened up My Sustainability Plan for any organisation to use. Do you know of any other organisations that have tried out the program?
No, I don't. I wasn't aware that it was open to other organisations, in fact.
Hey, great, thanks. Another question.
Answer?
Yeah. Well, certainly the user that submitted that question, if you have any more information about that, please feel free to submit it in the chat box and I'll pass that along to the other audience members and to Tim. The next question we have is, what are the best approaches that you have come across for measuring behavioural change?
I think a combination of the outputs. I mean, that's probably the best way, is actually looking at an organisation's waste to landfill, for instance, if that's what you're interested in, or energy use or water use. That's really the holy grail. That's what we try to do when we're trying to create a culture of sustainability, is to have more sustainable outcomes for the organisation. In terms of measuring it in the culture, as I mentioned, the sustainability culture indicator I developed also asks people about their behaviours. There is often a gap between what people say and the reality, though. So we can ask people, do you always recycle? Do you always turn off the tap when you brush your teeth, etc.? It's not a bad indicator, but often people exaggerate a little. So the best way is to actually look at the outcomes. The second best way is to measure through surveys or interviews ask people what they do. But the best way is to actually look at their outcomes.
Thanks, Tim. Next question we have is, what are some strategies that you can recommend to overcome sustainability fatigue or skepticism within an organisation?
I think making it relevant, as I said before, making the efforts relevant. So rather than just assuming that people don't know anything about sustainability, for instance, a lot of sustainable behaviours sustainability activities are based on assumptions about what people need, rather than actually finding out where people are at with sustainability. So often we'll see people or green teams, etc., just say, well, there's still too much paper use, so we need to start putting some signs up around to ask people to reduce their paper use, rather than going to people and saying, well, why aren't you saving paper? Well, why isn't this organisation saving paper? And you might find there's nothing to do with information or awareness. It might be to do with the processes or the knowledge. People might not know how to double side. And so the best way to beat green fatigue is to make it relevant to people, so they're not hearing the same message which might not be relevant to them. If it's something that people need and it's targeted at what people need, then it's less likely that people are going to be fatigued by it. People are a little bit sick of being lectured to about how important sustainability is and how important green is. They want to see things that will actually support them to change, because they'll feel better about themselves if they're armed with tools to actually change.
Thanks, Tim. I think leading on from that, how do we best engage and influence leaders and managers within organisations?
Well, for a start, I think there's often a perception that managers and leaders are not necessarily human beings. So often people talk about them as different sort of beasts. Leaders and managers of organisations are people just the same as the rest of the employees, and so the influencing strategies for them are often the same. It's looking at what do they value. Now the difference is that often they are more accountable for the financials in the organisation or have more awareness of that. But all that means is that there's a different sort of value you need to be speaking to. So again, demonstrating the business case is important, but not just the business case. You also need, just like with other people in the community or in organisations, engaging with the heart is pretty important. So yes, show the business case, but people are also persuaded when you're able to engage with them on a different sort of level. So if you're able to engage people's hearts and get them to actually feel it and see that this is actually important and meets our values, is another way of influencing them. There's a technique I didn't mention in terms of behaviour change called creating cognitive dissonance, which is a state it's a psychology term for a state where there's a gap between what you're doing and what your values are. So when you're doing something that's not aligned with your beliefs or your values, often you can do that unconsciously, but when it's brought to your awareness, then you're more likely to have a bit of a jolt and to feel a bit uncomfortable. So, for instance, I might have pretty strong green values, but still fly overseas every couple of months for an overseas holiday, etc. And I might not have even really thought about that, but when it's pointed out to me, I'm more likely to feel like, gee, I better do something about that. It sort of raises your awareness and makes you feel uncomfortable. So with leaders and organisations, you can demonstrate that that certain behaviours or certain operations of the organisation are out of alignment with the organisation's values, and that's quite a strong motivator. So anytime you can demonstrate that the sustainable behaviour that you're promoting is aligned with the organisation's commitments and values, it's a strong influencer for people, including leaders. So it's a combination of building the business case, but not just relying on the business case. Also showing that it's important for the business's values and integrity.
Great, thanks, Tim.
I should also mention that.
Yes.
So I should also mention influencing. There's a whole approach to influencing people for sustainability, which we do in the behaviour change workshop which I run, which is about there's three main principles to influencing people that come out in this research, which is giving people some sort of choice or negotiation. So rather than just saying to them, it's my way or the highway, actually giving people some choice about how they engage in a sustainable behaviour. So including managers or leaders, rather than just saying to them, here's what we're going to do, say to them, here, work with me, how can we do this? That's one of the principles. Actually recognising that you understand their perspective and you can understand their feelings is another way of influencing people. Again, it works with leaders and managers as well. If you can show that you know what pressures they're under, you know what they value and what their priority is, and it's more likely that they will engage in what you're trying to do, and also showing them a clear rationale. So it's showing people a clear rationale or a business case, showing that you understand their needs and wishes, and giving them some negotiation or choice about how they engage. Are the three main principles of influencing anybody, including leaders.
Great, thanks, Tim. I've got another interesting question here from an audience member is, have you seen examples of sustainable black operations or black ops engaging proactive behaviour from the bottom up?
I'm not exactly sure what he refers to in terms of black operations. Talking about more sort of clandestine kind of approaches to sustainability. I probably need a bit more clarification of what we're talking about.
All right, no worries. If that presenter could just provide me a little bit more clarification, we'll re-present that later on. The next question that we have is, are any of the 13 enablers that you discussed within your presentation more important than others?
Yes, I think they are. In terms of organisational enablers, as I mentioned, the two biggest ones which come through in the research are the commitment to sustainability and the leadership. And so an organisation having a really clear sustainability framework and clarifying and communicating what the organisation stands for around sustainability is an important driver, and also having leadership which supports it. So leadership which demonstrates sustainability and really sort of walks the talk and shows it themselves. And that's things like not having, not saying that we're a really green organisation and then having all the executives driving around in really big, petrol guzzling cars. That's just a real sign for people, and you hear it on the shop floor in organisations all the time. We talk about sustainability, people roll their eyes and say, "Well, we'll start doing it once the executives stop driving around in big four-wheel drives. Go down and have a look in the car park." And so, that sort of leadership's important, but also so it's demonstrating the behaviours that you're asking other people to do, but also supporting people in terms of their engagement in sustainability. So those are two big organisational drivers. In terms of individual enablers, the most important ones there are probably around that individual responsibility. If people feel a sense of ownership, then they often won't let the other barriers get in the way so much. If people believe in it and feel like this is a really important thing, then they'll be more motivated to overcome the other barriers. So that's why engagement and responsibility is really important. So those would be the main ones.
Okay, Tim, just a bit of clarification on the previous question. So it's, have you seen uptake of sustainable behaviour without the full operational support from top management?
Okay, I thought that's what he meant, or she meant. I'm just trying to think. So I think that's an example of the individual enablers being in place, but not necessarily the organisational enablers being in place. And yes, I have seen that in organisations, and the big key there is influencing the sustainability leaders. So at some point, rather than just propagating sustainability from below, at some point the above needs to be engaged in order to provide all of those organisational enablers. So you might be able to do some stuff, and it's a really good start if the employees of the organisation are engaged in sustainability. But as I sort of outlined, there's a really important role for the organisational enablers as well, and a lot of those things need management support. It's pretty hard for a few pioneering individuals in the organisation to provide a lot of that organisational support without at some point engaging the decision makers, people who hold the purse strings. So yes, it's possible, but the path to making that happen is really to engage some more senior people, and the same influencing strategies that I talked about before are important. So showing them the business case, but also engaging them in terms of the values and the opportunities for the organisation. Otherwise, there'll be some gaps in terms of the organisational enablers that are really important, and you might find that, I'd argue that you can't develop a really comprehensive culture of sustainability without some of those enablers in place.
Great, thanks, Tim. The actual influence, the enablers that you mentioned sound quite easy. Are there any traps or issues that organisations really need to be aware of when launching an internal sustainability program?
Traps, I guess, making sure that one of the traps is around priorities. Often it's easy to make everything a priority and to say that, we're going to prioritise sustainability now. But the term prioritisation really implies that one thing will be prioritised over another. And so it needs to be, people get a bit confused by that, because it makes sustainability a priority. They don't necessarily know what's going to be deprioritised, and so really being clear to people, what does that mean? What is our mandate to do here? Are we prepared to pay a bit more for sustainability outcomes, that sort of thing? So being really clear about what you actually mean by sustainability is one of the traps is to not do that. Another one is around. It's not necessarily a trap, but it's a need to clarify pretty early on about what the definition of sustainability is for the organisation. So often people think it's environmental things only. And so, I recently ran a set of workshops with an organisation, with all the employees in the organisation, where you could sense that people felt like this is just an environmental initiative. And as soon as we demonstrated or explained to them what our definition of sustainability was and demonstrated the balance between the triple bottom line, the environmental, social, and economic side of it, people sort of relaxed a little, and they could sort of see that, okay, it's not such a threat to us. It's not just a bunch of greenies trying to convert us to their way of thinking. It's actually about smart business efficiency, all that sort of thing. So that's one of the traps as well, not early enough explanation and engagement of people on sustainability. Another one of the traps is about trying to do too much at the start in terms of the processes before engaging people. As I mentioned before, it's a really big job, sustainability actions, and saying to the sustainability manager, here, go out and do all this work is a common thing you see in organisations, that they work really hard as sustainability managers, often with not a lot of budget, whereas a comprehensive approach to sustainability involves everyone. It's not just the sustainability department's job. So one of the traps is to make it a project rather than a full organisational transformation. So those would be some of the traps and pitfalls that I see in terms of creating a culture of sustainability.
Thanks, Tim. I think following on from your mention of priorities, if there was one thing an organisation could do to embed sustainability in their culture, what would you recommend?
Creating a framework as a start, creating a commitment and a framework for sustainability would be the first place to start. I wouldn't necessarily call it the only thing, because I think if you only did one thing, then it wouldn't work. So you need, but the first thing is to create a sustainability framework, I think, as the main priority. But obviously you need to follow on from the actions within that sustainability framework. I think the second most important thing would be around that engaging people, not just telling them. So giving people an opportunity to examine it in terms of their own jobs, not just communicating that this is what we're going to do now, here's how you're going to do it.
Great, thanks, Tim. Could you possibly provide an example of where a sustainability program has worked in the past, and alternatively where one hasn't worked so well?
Where it has worked and where it hasn't worked?
Yeah, that's correct.
Sorry, I just missed part of the question. Okay, example of sustainability programs that work well. I guess it's no one sort of program. I'll talk about organisations that have a really good culture of sustainability. Melbourne Water is one that I've worked with a bit over the last couple of years, and what really helps there, what really makes them, I mean, they've got a really strong culture of sustainability, and what really helps there is the leadership commitment and support. Everybody in the organisation knows that the leadership supports this stuff, and so that really permeates throughout the organisation, and also each department. It's quite a diverse organisation, and they all, in their own way, have an interpretation of sustainability and how it relates to them. So that's an example of an organisation which has really done good things around sustainability. Where it hasn't worked, I think we see organisations that create sustainability as a brand value, but not necessarily embed it into their culture. So they've engaged with sustainability because it sells more stuff, and so they've said, this is our brand, this is what we're going to really lead with, and we're going to be known as the green provider in this industry, but they don't necessarily engage their people, and don't necessarily change their operations. All they do is change their marketing and branding. So, and part of that's to do with the intention as well. It's no different to when we get people to engage in behaviours because we've provided them with a bribe or incentivised them or a punishment or whatever. If people engage on that basis, then the quality of the engagement's not as strong, and it works the same way with organisations. If organisations just do it out of self-interest for very narrow reasons, then it's demonstrated long-term in their behaviours as an organisation and in their operations. Sure, there has to be something in it for the organisation. There has to be a business case for it. But if it's the only reason that they do it, then they're less likely to stick with it long-term through the tough times, and they're less likely to have a comprehensive approach to it.
Thanks, Tim. How is the global financial crisis and the ongoing high Australian dollar affecting business culture around green IT and sustainability strategy?
I think in some organisations it's still seen as a nice to have, and so it's one of the first things that get cut. Or government organisations in particular, it seems to be that sustainability budgets are being cut a fair bit. But other organisations are recognising, particularly energy efficiency, and I'm sure IT is no exception, that sustainability is not just about spending money in order to look after the environment. It's actually about creating a smarter, more efficient business, and that's something I always have to emphasise in the workshops and the engagement programs that we do. This is about running a smarter, more efficient business and eliminating waste is a big part of sustainability. And so any organisation that's struggling would do well to see ways in which they can create a more energy efficient organisation. And I see it everywhere. There's so much low-hanging fruit still in organisations. So there's big hard things to do, like transforming our power from coal-fired to solar and that sort of thing. Those are big challenges, but there's still a lot of waste in terms of energy efficiency. Everywhere you go, you see lights that are on that don't need to be on, etc. So, the smart response to the global financial crisis is saying sustainability is more important than ever now, because it's a way we can reduce cost, but also as a business opportunity, you will hear a lot of people talking about. There's a lot of opportunities in a greener organisation in terms of new markets and innovation, that sort of thing.
Thanks, Tim. Just a notice to the audience, the live portion of this Q&A session will be coming to a close shortly, so if you do have any remaining questions for Tim, please do submit them now. The next question we have for you, Tim, is what books or resources could you recommend for people going down this path?
There's some which are inspirational and some which are more instructional. On the inspirational side, as I mentioned before, read any of Ray Anderson's books, particularly Confessions of a Radical Industrialist, as I mentioned before. It's a really good book about their sustainability journey, like what they did to transform a really, I guess he would just term it as an unsustainable, wasteful organisation into a world's best practice sustainable manufacturing organisation. In terms of business strategy and frameworks and that sort of thing, there's a couple of good books. Bob Willard is an author of a number of books on the sustainability advantage, and I believe he's just re-released a revised version of that, which if you Google it, I'm sure you'll probably find him a webinar or a book launch. I think I saw one advertised a couple of days ago, so it's a good time to be engaged with Bob Willard's work. He's a pioneer in this area. There's another book particularly strong on sustainability frameworks and the step-by-step approach to creating a sustainable organisation by Darcy Hitchcock and Marcia Willard, who's Bob Willard's wife, I think. And I can't remember the name of the book. It's something like creating steps to a sustainable business or something. But if you look up Hitchcock and Willard, you'll find those. Created 2 books on that. Bob Doppelt is an author of a couple of books. That's more around the individuals taking responsibility for sustainability, the power of sustainable thinking. I think I'm just looking on my bookshelf, craning my neck to look on my bookshelf. It's the power of sustainable thinking is Bob Doppelt, one of Bob Doppelt's books. And lastly, as mentioned, the wake-up call e-zine, which I put out every month is quite a good resource if you're looking to know more about sustainability and psychology and behaviour change and culture.
Thanks, Tim. Final question for today on this session is, if there was one thing that you'd want our audience members to take away from today's presentation, what would that be?
It would be to share the responsibility for creating a culture of sustainability and engage people, not just communicate it to them, tell them, but engage them and really give people an opportunity to see what it means to them and take responsibility for it, but not in a demanding sort of lecturing way. Saying here's why we're going down the path of sustainability. It's not a threatening sort of thing. Here are the benefits to the organisation. Take a moment to reflect on what that means to you as a person, not just as a worker, but as a person. How does that relate to your individual sort of values, and how's it going to relate to your day-to-day job? Getting people involved and get their ideas on how to engage or how to create a more sustainable organisation, because often we do this stuff around getting people's buy-in and engagement and all that sort of thing as a way of engaging them, but it's also on a practical level. It's pretty difficult for the sustainability manager to know how everybody in the field can do their job more sustainably. So we actually need their ideas for a reason, not just to make them feel good about buying into it, but also for a practical reason. The only person, or one of the only people who knows how to make a change on the floor is the person who's actually working on the floor. So that's going to be part of your engagement approach as well, inviting ideas for a reason, not just for lip service. So engagement and getting ideas is the one takeaway I would suggest. It's getting people across it early.
Great. Thank you so much, Tim. Well, that will end our webinar session for today. So I'd like to say a big thank you to our speaker, Tim, for your time and your willingness to share not only your information, but your expertise and experiences. We really appreciate your time and your insights for today.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Pleasure.
Also, thanks to all of you who participated in today's session. We're really glad you could join us, and we hope the session was helpful and insightful for you. Just a reminder that a recording of this webinar session will be made available within 24 hours via the Green IT Week virtual registration page, the same page you used to register for this session. Did you have any closing comments or remarks, Tim?
No, just to thank you all for attending. Welcome to contact me with any sort of questions around creating a culture of sustainability. I'd love to discuss this sort of thing. I'm pretty passionate about it, so always happy to engage in dialogue around it. So, yeah, thank you and good luck with it.
Well, that concludes our session for today. So, again, thank you, everyone, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.